So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. Picking up on Sesha's comments about really the confluence of devices as well as pharmaceutical, I think you'll see a little bit of that, although my case studies will really be purely pharmaceutical. So I'll start by giving you a sort of a very quick run through of the company to give you a context, and I'll go straight into 2 or 3 case studies of how drug delivery and formulation has really made an incredible difference, both to improve patient care, but also in terms of establishment of new intellectual property and therefore longevity of these products. So I've been very fortunate that I arrived at the very end of 1997 from Switzerland to California. And you can see we've had a pretty nice time, 17%, 16% compound annual sales growth. We just declared our numbers yesterday, 2 days ago, $5.8 billion in sales last year. If we look at earnings per share, pretty much mirror the sales growth. I think very importantly, we're a very unique position given our franchises that I'm able to say to the investment community, you know, we should be growing about 10%-ish, albeit in local currencies for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years, based on the product approvals we already have or ones that are right around the corner. And this will be done not only continuing with very strong gross margin, leveraging SG&A, but above all, heavily investing in R&D to really bring through the products that we'll be selling in the second half of this decade. If we look at the company, it has a couple of very unique characteristics. By the standards of a West Coast company, we're pretty ancient. Our founder established Allergan above literally the pharmacy, the family store, Wilshire Boulevard, Los Angeles, 1950. What also makes it very unusual is that I'm only the 3rd CEO in all of this time. Admittedly, the founder ran the company for about 40-something years. Recently, I had some fun. I said, how long were you actually CEO? And his comment was, well, we didn't have those fancy titles back then. So I said, how long were you the head man? And then he gave me the answer, right? So fortunately for me, classical problem, you know, founder to successor doesn't always go well in any organization. And so 16 years ago, the trauma of bringing in somebody from the outside occurred, and happily, it's a happy story, it all worked. If you look at our footprint, extremely focused, really plants of scale, we really have only 5. I'm afraid I've been a plant killer over my life. I believe in having few and then having them heavily capitalized and very efficient. In R&D, really most of it is done in Irvine for the pharma side. The medical device center is in Santa Barbara, and then we have clinical development sites in just outside London and Beijing and Tokyo, which is pretty standard for the rest of the industry. If you look at our portfolio, most people maybe in the industry think of Allergan as an ophthalmology company. Of course, the general public think we're the Botox company, and that's fine. I notice you're all sitting at the back of the room, just so I can't see your wrinkles, but it's okay, I'll come and get you later, right? So as you can see, you know, still half the company almost half is ophthalmology. Botox in its 2 constituent parts, about a third, and therapeutic just pulling away to being a bit bigger than the famous glabellar lines or aesthetic use. If you look at the red comment at the top, you'll see what makes us rather unusual relative to the rest of the industry is that about 38% is cash pay. And of course, when governments are either mandating price reductions overseas or the Affordable Care Act is beginning to bite in the United States, at that moment being cash pay feels real good. I can tell you it was the other way around in the beginning of 2009, where I was a little concerned whether wrinkles really were coming back into fashion. Happily, that didn't occur. I like to joke at that time, your face is the one outfit you wear every day. So people save money elsewhere, but not on Botox or fillers. at least not very much for very long. So if you look at our footprint, or what we stand for today, it's really extreme specialization, and it's a very simple strategy in its essence, because it's a surround the customer strategy. Bring a full suite, basically, of products for every single need they might have and offer excellent service. As you saw from the pie chart, pretty well diversified both by business, by payer type, and geography, because about 40% of our business is ex-US. Huge presence in emerging markets thanks to ophthalmology. That's always our foundation stone before we add the other businesses. And then we have had some nice cases of building businesses when really no market had existed, which is the best form of innovation. 15 years ago, Botox was really almost a secret for a few crazy people, typically in California, or New York, or Miami. And then once we got to Sesha's alma mater in Kansas, you've really arrived, you've gone mainstream, right? Botox chronic migraine is at its infancy. Restasis, therapeutic dry product based on cyclosporin. Oddly enough, I used to work for Sandoz, the old Sandoz. That's where it came from. We repurposed the drug, and today it's the largest single ophthalmic pharmaceutical by value. And the Latisse I'll get into, is the eyelash enhancer, and that was basically just looking at opportunity that was staring us in the face. So really, as I said before, the company is all about surrounding the customer. And so if you just glance at ophthalmology, has the most brand names in the column. Every single subset segment of ophthalmics we're in: glaucoma, retina, dry eye, anti-infectives, anti-inflammatories, artificial tears. Medical aesthetics is pretty much the category we created, because now in 2006 we acquired Inamed, and that was a medical device company in Santa Barbara. And as a recovering lawyer, I must admit, for the first sort of half hour, I thought maybe I'd been out in the sunshine a little too much in California and had an effect on my ability to think straight, because of course Inamed was, oh my lord, a breast implant company, and we were contemplating getting silicone back on the market. So that kind of scared me for a couple of seconds. Happily, once we did the research, you could see the lawyers had got ahead of the scientists. So that's why we bought the company, and basically enabled us to put together a suite of Botox, dermal fillers, and for plastic surgery, breast implants for augmentation and reconstruction. So I was thinking, what on earth are we going to call this? And so I came up with this idea of medical aesthetics. I asked my team, I said, do you have a better word? I'll give you 2 weeks to give me a better answer. No better answer. Now the world's press writes about medical aesthetics as if it had existed for decades. And I suppose that's called innovation and marketing. It kind of works. Of course, that field is right beside medical dermatology, because a lot of those medical aesthetic practitioners are dermatologists. Some are somewhat separate, but most do a bit of both. Then neurology, thanks to Botox, movement disorders, spasticity, migraine. And then urology, we came into that business through Botox again. And just the last couple of weeks, we got our second urology indication from FDA, Botox for overactive bladder, or in plain English, severe incontinence. And then the obesity intervention business, we announced we're selling it 2 days ago. So of course, all of us that ever studied business, learned a long time ago, if you're going to do something, do it very well. And you can see in the third column, we're either number 1 or number 2 in each of our categories worldwide, and you can see the market shares. As I came into the company a long time ago, 16 years ago, I had this view that really simplistically in a pharmaceutical or device company, really only 2 things count. It's either R&D, which is innovation, or sales force, which is service and physician and patient education. I think this is pretty unusual if you look on the red and the blue, that over half our company still today is in one of those 2 functions. And I like to say to my colleagues, they now know my sense of humor, in the light blue, we're kind of the necessary evil, right? That's the overhead, right? And we try and keep that as skinny as we can so we can really massively invest into those two things. And you can see the percentages, are huge. And when you think also, when I started, the sales, excluding the business we spun off, which was ophthalmic surgical products, was 600 million base. Today, 5.8 billion. And just look at you don't need to do math to see just enormous productivity, which of course then explains how do we continue to invest in R&D. So these are the products that really make me pretty confident that we can grow about 10% for the next couple of years. A lot of glaucoma products, Restasis, dry eye, and then above all, Botox in its most recently approved indications for spasticity, migraine, and bladder, and then the most recent isn't even on this chart because it happened 2 weeks ago, overactive bladder. Of course, no Allergan talk would ever be complete with at least one Botox slide, and you can see, it was literally an orphan drug. This was a license from our founder back in 88. He bought the company for the princely sum of $28 million. Company folklore was that for strabismus and blepharospasm, orphan, very niche indications, pretty severe in ophthalmology, rare, and one day sales would reach 5 million. And they meant per year and worldwide. These days, of course, if I don't do that per day, I'd be sweating profusely, but happily FDA approved that indication as well, axillary hyperhidrosis, and that's an easy one. I could just about do it myself. So, tremendous growth, and at least according to Jim Cramer, when he interviewed me this week, Botox is going to double by 2020, so I'll trust Jim. Here's the growth rate of the two sides. You can see steadily growing. Therapeutic about to lift off because of migraine and bladder, and of course, the cosmetic side continuing to grow around about 10%. Really now I'll get into the real meat of what you want to hear from me, which is what about drug delivery and formulation? So really in our business, which is the two big ones, beyond Botox being a very targeted delivery of a very, very powerful neurotoxin. And amongst my colleagues, when I go to the bio board, of course, I know all the great doyens, the leaders of biotechnology. And I used to have fun with them and say, how much active do we need? And I won't shame anybody because you know them all, and I don't want to get a text message in an hour's time that I'd been maligning them. And I said, how much active do we need? And all of them were in sort of 7, 8, 10, 12 kilograms per year. Last year, less than 1 gram of raw neurotoxin to supply the whole world with all 26 licensed indications and well over 4 million vials. So it's kind of complicated. But if you go to ophthalmology and derm, it's all about formulation, pH, and things like that, as well as maybe if I look at Ozurdex, which is the one on the bottom right, how do you actually deliver these drugs to the back of the eye? Fortunately, due to our really success of repurposing drugs or in-licensing drugs for systemic use and then turning them into applications for ophthalmology or derm, in my view, that's why we've had incredibly high success ratios, typically 2 to 3 times more successful than the rest of complete pharma. And part of it clearly is our specialization. We actually know quite a lot about ophthalmology after 50 years, or quite a lot about dermatology. But part of it is because we really don't have severe toxicity issues, because we really don't buy much active. We don't need much active. And being Scottish, that's kind of cool too, because that means you don't spend too much money on it. So let me give you a couple of examples of how we've harnessed our knowledge to really improve our products. And so the first one was Alphagan. And so this one was, if I think a way back, actually a failed cardiovascular medicine I recollect from Pfizer from about 20 years ago. And we got our hands on this molecule, brimonidine. It is well known that it had certain side effects, particularly somnolence.
When we launched it in early 97, TID dosing was clearly not competitive. The market was BID and about to go to QD. And of course, with 5-year data exclusivity, you can work out that we actually did a decent job getting that product off the mat and into the hands of the doctors. But everybody was saying, well, tough luck, Mr. Pyott, 5 years data exclusivity, you're gone in 2002. As I get to the end of this story, you'll see we just got one digit wrong. Allergan will go off patent in 2022. So in our world, of course, amongst friends, one digit, 20 years, kind of cool. So we then moved on to Allergan P, 0.15%. So the original one, 0.2. The Purite is the P, is our preservative system. And really the key insight was getting a very narrow range of pH between 6.9 to 7.4 to ensure greater bioavailability of the active to lowering intraocular pressure. Now, if you go too high in pH, then you get great discomfort. And way back in Allergan's history, we had one of those. And internally, that product was known as Blink and Scream. Not a great product for ophthalmologists. So that pH and the excipients and Purite, really, really important. And what it led to was with less active, less side effects. And the most important one was a very dramatic reduction in allergy. And if people are allergic to brimonidine, they will be brought off brimonidine. They'll end up with a very red eye very quickly, and they'll never be put back on the drug again. So a real benefit to patients because, of course, now this is used adjunctively in today's world to a prostaglandin, really offering extra intraocular pressure lowering. And of course, not only a patient benefit, but also new patents and new life. So then we move on to the next part of the story that gets even more fascinating. So by this stage, we'd worked out, okay, we can have less active. Let's see if we can do it again. So then we reduced it from 0.2, 0.15, 0.1. And we got that one approved in the third quarter of 2005. Very importantly for FDA, they said, well, we'll only approve this drug if you have comparable intraocular pressure lowering to the original, which makes absolute sense. And we're able to do that. Again, by adjusting the pH, slightly different from the 0.15. Now, of course, very important for us, you can see sort of a couple of lines down. If we could protect this molecule, that brought us to the 2022 patent expiry. Another thing we did was in 2008, because of course where I sit, you have to think about risk. That are you really going to uphold your patent estate or not? Which is why we ended up negotiating a license with Alcon, which is kind of, we're Pepsi and they're Coke, right? So this is our nemesis in ophthalmics worldwide. Very fine company owned by Novartis these days. And looking back when we did that, we thought, okay, this parlays risk. But you can see, in fact, looking back, I should never have done it, because in the second quarter of 2009, the Delaware court upheld all 5 patents on Allergan. And I don't want to jinx myself, but every single one of the glaucoma wars we've had, and I know there's a few generic people in the room, we've won. So we're a really tough nut to crack. So very interesting when you see what happened in the marketplace. Due to the better performance of the product of 0.1, even a year later, after Alcon had launched their 0.15, you can see the generics of the first 2 delivery formulations only had captured 35% of the brand. If we then add in another really cool idea, which was, how do you secure compliance? Because even if you're not particularly old, putting in multiple drops per day is quite a chore. And of course, most people just don't realize how important compliance is. I'm sure you've heard glaucoma being referred to as the silent sneak of sight. And it's only once you started losing it that you realize you should have been much better behaved with your drops earlier on. So that's why we came up with Combigan, which is again brimonidine, Allergan, mixed with timolol.
That was a breakthrough to get it approved because it's only the second since the mid-1990s, co-sopped by Merck and Combigan by ourselves. And once again, due to formulation, we're able to avoid the somnolence effects that exist by giving both of those components separately. So ending that story, you can see despite all of those legal challenges, the technical challenges, still today, branded brimonidine products have 70% of the US market, which is a rare, rare story when you think about what happens to pharmaceutical compounds in general.